So today, I think this one's a little bit more emotion-based. It's going to be a little less analytical. We started talking about sort of this idea of underachievement. I remember you being the most delightful, talked about kid, like when we would go pick you up from preschool. But then I realized somewhere along the way, and that really shifted when you went to school, the way people perceived you and the way that you were being talked about and what was happening really shifted.
I knew first and second grade felt very overwhelming, but I think third grade was when it really started shifting for me. It just became untenable. As an adult, I can look back and say, oh, this was an attempt to help fix the symptoms, but the way they were presented to me, it felt like I had to fix me. All I needed to hear was, you are perfect just the way you are, and if they don't like you, then they can go f*** themselves.
Hello, Megan.
Hello, Michelle.
Welcome to Sisters. There were never such devoted sisters. Hello. Good to see you there, love. How's
good
it
to
going?
See you. It's good as always. I'm with you.
So much fun. So today, as every day, we usually bring up something, little tidbit, discuss a little topic. Then we kind of like dig into that brain of yours and look at that neuro-spicy, neuro-fabulous, neuro-distinct, and specifically the ADHD-ness of your brain recently. Mm-hmm. There's a whole bunch of things inside that brain area, so at some point we'll move into other areas, but the ADHD is what we've been focusing on.
It's
and
cavernous, Michelle.
Cavernous. And then we like to look at some strategies, right, that sometimes help you with some things. And then like shout out to our community to find out, did they have any help? Because we are in desperate need of it at all times.
Yeah, and our community continues to grow. It's exciting.
That's so exciting.
Yeah.
I know. And I hear it from friends when they're listening.
Cool.
Yeah.
I love it.
One of my friends came up and was like, we were at a staff meeting and they're like, oh, I feel like I'm with somebody famous. I just heard you on my car radio. And I'm like, oh, yeah. So that's so fun. Okay, so today I think this one's a little bit more emotion-based, potentially, right? It's going to be a little less analytical. Okay. And what was interesting to me the other day, I was saying, hey, I kind of want to deep dive into the emotions. And you're like, oh, finally.
Like that I can handle.
That's so easy for me. The rest of this has been torturous. I'm like, I'm so sorry. So what I wanted to kind of bring up was I remember when you were about maybe like 3 or 4. And I remember you being the most delightful, talked about kid. Like when we would go pick you up from preschool, because I'm about 7 years older than you, all the teachers were just glowing about your creativity and how amazing you were. And they just loved you so much.
Really?
And I mean, there were moments, right, where you were a little hyper, but they loved you so much. Now, I think preschool teachers are a special group. So we can give them a little shout out because like amazing that they can be with the little children all day long.
Seriously.
But then I realized somewhere along the way, and I was kind of off to college and coming back, and that really shifted when you went to school, that the way people perceived you and the way that you were being talked about and what was happening really shifted. And so today I kind of wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about what it felt like to go from being what I consider to be very high achieving. I don't know if preschoolers can be very high achieving, but I felt like you were. They all thought you were so brilliant. To then being put in a situation where you felt what I can only imagine was sort of the opposite.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really remember a lot from that time period as far as like how I physically felt. I know that like I've been told a lot about like how I had a light in my eyes and then the light just sort of diminished. So I could probably tell you how it felt having that diminished light and then sort of when I kind of got out of it.
When do you remember, like how far back? I mean, do you have this sense of remembering that you felt like you weren't achieving whatever was being asked of you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And when did that sort of start for you that you remember it?
Let's see, Mrs. Campista, which would have been what, like second or third grade?
Third grade, yeah.
Yeah, I want to say third grade is kind of when I really started to realize it. I mean, I knew first, second grade felt very overwhelming. That's kind of like the sense that I have from it. But I think third grade was when it really started shifting for me. It just became untenable.
What did
for
it
me.
feel like? What was happening that it became untenable?
It just felt like there were these tasks that I was expected to do that were just like these Herculean tasks. They were just like mammoth sized tasks that you just, like how could anyone get that stuff done ever? Like having to write in a journal every single night. I was like, and then you had to write an actual page, a full page every night. Oh, however long it was. But I remember
felt like a whole page, if it wasn't. Yeah.
It did. Yeah. And well, no, I think it was supposed to be a full page in wide ruled, which is fine. But I remember like at some point I started cutting pictures out and putting them in there so it would take it would take up some space. I recently found them.
Collage.
I recently found them and she's like, very creative, Megan, but that's not the task. I was like, but it's the only way I can get it done. Or I would like start writing in really big handwriting because it was just torturous to have to write that long. And I'm like, what am I going to write about? Like, I don't know. Like, I can barely keep track of my own thoughts, let alone like writing them down. So it always felt really hard. And it always felt, I don't want to say rigged against me, but it did feel like if I was somebody else, it would be fine. It would be super easy and I'd be able to take care of everything. But because I was born with this stupid head of mine, something was wrong with me. I could just never like figure it out. I could never like get it together, right? Like it just was always, I don't know, just always was hard.
Always out of reach.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's like everybody else seems to make it so easy and everyone says, oh, it's just so easy. You just do da 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 da. And I'm like, that is not my existence.
And so when you're in that place on a daily basis as a kid, what does that do to you emotionally? Or what might that have done to you emotionally? Do you still feel that way sometimes?
Oh, yeah. No, I kind of teased it before, but my therapist makes really good money because of it. It took me to a pretty dark place. What was the question again? Like, how did you say it?
Well, I wondered kind of what it was like for you emotionally to always be perceiving that you were not getting your act together or getting it done, or that goal, that task was always out of reach.
The first word that's coming to mind is that it feels unjust. Because now I look at it and I'm like, gosh, I had the capability, I had the intelligence, and because my way of processing the world was not stimulated and encouraged, I spent so many decades thinking that I was dumb and that I wasn't good enough and that I couldn't get my act together. And it still lingers to this day. I mean, I still struggle like looking at my messy bed right now. I'm like, gosh, if I could just get my act together and put it away, like, why can't I just put it away? It's more than just putting something away. It's like there's all these tasks that I'm looking at it and it's like there's things that need to happen. And so I think it's easy to put away the things that don't have other actions on them. So it's just like I overcomplicate things for sure.
And so when you think about the feelings behind that, you're not, I don't know how you said it. Did you say that you needed to be somebody else's brain, first of all? You needed to be someone else. Mm-hmm. What does that do to a kid? I mean, that's just, I don't know. It's hard to even like conceive of what that might feel like to me sometimes. A feeling like the actual being of who I am is not enough or isn't valued.
Yeah. No, that is a consistent thing for me. I think what it does is there's no such thing as self-love at that point. And that is what it felt like. It felt like I had to be more mean to myself to combat the meanness that other people would do. People always say like, well, if you make a joke first about yourself, then other people can't make a joke about you. So I just didn't love myself. So when no one else loved me, it was fine. I didn't have any expectation that I would be loved or that I was lovable.
When you say that, it obviously hits me really hard because I do love you. Mm-hmm. what did that look like coming from me or coming from your family or coming from your friends to feel like you didn't think that we loved you or that you weren't lovable?
I think I separated the two things. So I knew that people loved me. I knew that you loved me. It just felt very conditional. It felt like, for me anyways, my perception of it was that if I could just get my act together, if I could just get up on time and do these things, then the love would be consistent. And that I could feel the frustration in others. That I think when you're younger, you don't recognize that you can have multiple emotions and feelings happening at the same time. So you can be frustrated with somebody and still love them.
Right.
And I just always thought that like as soon as someone was frustrated with me, that was the end of it and their love was gone in that moment.
So it's really black and white for you.
Yeah, for a very long time. Mm-hmm.
And do you think that's because that emotion was just predominant? Like it was coming out more forcefully, or it was...
I think it's easier to, like, our society seems like it's easier for people to be upset with each other. Like that's when we really communicate feelings about others. And we don't always talk about the good stuff. It took me decades to realize that people thought I was attractive. I heard boys talking about other girls to me all the time, but no one ever talked to me about me. So if the only thing I'm ever hearing is other people, I have no idea that anyone's interested in me. And I think that's kind of what happened to me too, is that like, yes, I had these interesting things that occurred that happened to me. And I know you guys did like the carnival. Like I know you guys talked when it happened, it was really cool, or whatever kind of creative things I would be doing, those things would pop up and we would talk about them. But I think the fact is like the deficit part, the deficiency part was so everyday that was the majority of the conversation. It was always like trying to fix me and fix the problems. And that was the predominant, I would say like probably 85% of the conversation was usually around that. So there was conversation about good things, but it was drowned out by all the other things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as you're saying that, when you're saying the deficiency part, it sounds like it's also conflated in you being deficient versus fixing you versus fixing the symptoms or the issues that were going on.
As an adult, I can look back and say, oh, this was an attempt to help fix the symptoms. But the way they were presented to me, it felt like I had to fix me. It's one thing to say like you're wearing a pair of shoes that need to change, right? That's not you. That's a shoe that's on top of you. But like when you're talking about something in your brain, well, how do you differentiate when you're that young that this is not you? It's like to me, it just felt like me.
Yeah. And I don't think, at least from my perspective, I even understood what that meant.
Yeah.
Right. Like it seemed like, oh, it's just a skill you need to be able to learn, and you haven't learned that skill yet.
Yeah.
And so then because of that, let's practice that skill again and again. And then realizing, well, you're one of the most brilliant people I know. If that's not sticking with you for whatever reason, then something else is going on. But we really had no language around that.
Yeah.
And it was so frustrating for you, and it was frustrating for the people who loved you. But I can imagine, I know I didn't understand the emotional toll it was taking on you.
Yeah.
I could see it with friends and stuff, that you had difficulty sometimes making friends or keeping friends. And I could see that. I didn't really fully grasp what that meant within our family dynamic, I don't think.
Yeah, it's a tough one because I felt very close to all of you guys. Like I felt like we had this tight-knit bond. Family was revered, and that was what we were raised with. But then there was also always this sense of like I was just sort of out of reach. Like I just would keep myself just out of arm's length and never really commit to anything because it was easier for me to not be such a disappointment. I hid a lot. I masked a lot. Like that's why I became a really good liar, because it was so much easier to pretend that I wasn't who I was and to shut that person down than to actually own who I was.
Yeah. Just sitting with that for a minute. I think there's a sense from my perspective of it, of just trying to keep you going, keep you moving. And I think there was some fear in that from my point of view, that if I couldn't keep you moving, that maybe you would just float away.
Say more about that, because that's interesting to me.
When you were 4th or 5th grade, I remember coming home and you had stopped sleeping, you had mostly stopped eating, you had really dark circles under your eyes, you'd gotten very thin. And I was worried about you. Of course, never looking at it from the perspective of my contributions or lack thereof, you know, in what was going on. But I had been gone for a semester or so to college, and I came back and I was really, really worried about you because I didn't know what was going on exactly. I knew the school you were at was pretty brutal because I had gone there too, but I still had made friends and made the best of it. I was really happy to leave when I did, but I could see that you were that you were struggling for sure. And I remember when we got you out of that school and we got you to a new school where they had music and you really came alive, and I think started this journey of healing, because the brutality at that school, at the original place, was just so awful. Basically being told that you would never amount to anything, right? By a principal. How wonderful is that?
Being picked on by all the other kids. And
yeah, but my answer to it was like, let's get you to do your hair. Let's get you to like put on different clothes. Let's change you.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that was sadly helpful on some level because our society is so specifically, you know, but the message behind it, I think, was horrible. And that somehow you not being enough was the issue.
Yeah.
So with that, it was like, but like keeping you going to the next thing, not letting you wallow in that place, that really dark place. But I don't know that was really true. We might have just been masking it.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is like I was still wallowing in it, and it was more covert at that point, because I knew that I wasn't allowed to wallow in it and to express it. So I just had to pretend that it didn't exist and move on.
Mm-hmm. Chin up, carry on kind of thing.
Yeah. And I will say, like, I see the idea of, hey, do your hair and these things. I see the like the good rationale in it all. From my perspective, what I would have liked is if I had come to you guys and said, hey, I want to change this about myself. And it had been me saying, this is what I want to try. Or me saying, I want to try something different with my look. What do you recommend? But I think because it was presented as, hey, you need to, let's try changing this. It felt like, wait, I have to change myself to fit in. Mm-hmm. And then it got way more complicated. So I have to make jokes, and I'm like, I don't make jokes. And, you know, I have to be funny, and I'm like, I don't feel funny. But it wasn't just you, like everybody in the house kind of had their idea of how to fix me and how to help me. When in reality, probably all I needed to hear was, you are perfect just the way you are. And if they don't like you, then they can go fuck themselves. Which I know you can't say to a 7-year-old or whatever, but that sentiment, right? That you are perfect. Like, this is about them. This is not about you. And then when it's time for me, when I come to it saying, hey, I need help in this, and I want to try something different, then that's me individuating, right? That's me trying to figure out who I am at that point. Mm-hmm. But I think it was just because it was so early on, it really messed with me a lot.
Yeah, I'm so sorry that I think was just so misguided. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, just so misguided. And you were in 5th grade, so you weren't 7. You were hitting puberty. And
but Dad had started way earlier than you. So, you know, like it had been starting since 3rd grade. For all of my ADHD buds out there who need a break, now's your chance. Hit pause and come on back after you've done whatever you need to do to help yourself out. But if not, continue on.
So when you think about this feeling of, we started talking about sort of this idea of underachievement. And I think part of that is this idea that I'm not becoming this perfect daughter or perfect female or perfect whatever, right, we needed to become. Do you feel like there's things, if we're like digging into that a little bit more, that you've done to help yourself with that? I mean, you say kind of jokingly, right, that the therapist has gotten a lot of money out of it, but what might you've been doing for yourself in order to be able to kind of, I don't know if combat it is the right word, or if it's acknowledge it and move through it, or...
I think it has been, at least so far, it's been a 10-year journey. And I think that's the challenge of it, is that it doesn't just fix itself right away. And that even if it doesn't fix itself right away, it's okay. And you just keep growing and growing each day, right? It's like the onion. You peel one layer off and there's another stinky layer underneath. And you just got to keep peeling that onion and not give up on yourself. I think also just talking to you guys about it and not masking it anymore. That was I think I couldn't anymore. My body literally just physically gave up at one point, because it was like, I couldn't hold it in any longer. And being okay with the fact that I might lose friends and family in order to take care of myself. And I'm sure we'll talk about this at some point, but like, I had to do prolonged treatment, and I wasn't sure if I was going to have a relationship with you afterwards. I wasn't sure if you were going to accept it. And I wasn't sure if I was going to, I wasn't sure what was going to happen. And I was terrified of that idea, because I love you. And I like was so worried that if I really showed my true self, that somehow you wouldn't like it. And that's nothing that you did, right? That's just like what it turned into for me. And so I think that just having those hard conversations, I was lucky that you wanted to continue hanging out with me. And I think you said something to me at one point. I had missed Thanksgiving or something one year. It was like that first time where it was like I was saying no, and it felt like I was going to ruin Thanksgiving, and that's just how I felt about it. And I don't know if it was that point, or maybe another time when I did come and I didn't want to come, and you were just like, I appreciate it when you tell me that you're not able to come, because you are such a phenomenal person when you are here. If you're here when you don't want to be here, it's palpable. You admit. And so whatever it is you're feeling internally, you emit. So like, if I'm upset, I emit that feeling. Yeah. And I remember that being like such a pivotal moment for me. It gave me permission to say, what am I feeling? How am I feeling? Because if I'm not paying attention to this, like, I am affecting the people around me.
Yeah. And I think that the regulating of emotions is something that I've been reading more about. That was very unclear to me growing up. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand that. I think you said to me at some point, if I'm feeling something at a level 10, you're feeling it at a level 100. And so you have this immense ability to feel and also to emote those emotions. And you are such a high achiever. Like, you are somebody who, you've gotten your master's degree, you've been a professor, you've done shows, you've made movies, obviously you're the one producing this entire podcast. So you are such a high achiever. And I can only imagine how sort of that not mapping on. I mean, this kid who at the same time does a carnival, that's you, puts on this thing, is kind of withering on the vine at school. And somehow for us, and for me specifically, I can't speak for everybody, but for me to not see that connection feels like such a missed opportunity, and such a missed moment. And so caused you so much pain that the place that you're supposed to feel safest, right? The place you're supposed to feel home didn't feel safe always. And I know that I contributed to that. I also know and have understood that I was a child too.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to take it to the point of not recognizing that. But I do think for parents too, that there's just not enough information and help out there. And so you're trying to help, and your version of help could be really damaging, actually.
Yeah. Because I know that it all came from a good place. That's the reason why I think that I was able to work through a lot of this, is that it wasn't from a place of malice. Whereas I know other people, they had a lot of malice in their life. So I think it was the saving grace for me on some level. But yeah, I think it's really easy to think like, hey, I think I'm doing this good thing for you, right? Like my dog, I think that I'm giving her some human food, and that's a good thing because I'm giving her real food. If it's a raisin or an onion, or now for her chicken, like it's actually deadly to her.
Right.
And it's not with the intention that I want to harm her, but like it's just knowledge. And I think we just don't talk about the day to day enough. We don't talk about like strategies. It's all about like we've had to spend time learning about this ADHD thing.
Yeah.
And acknowledging that it even exists in adults, for crying out loud. So it's just been like trying to convince people that it's real. That's what we've been doing for like the last decade, I feel like. And now it's like we just need to find a safe place to be able to strategize about how to work with these kids so that you do feel like you have home and that you can be more receptive to what they need, because it's totally different than what a neurotypical brain needs.
Totally different.
Yeah.
Yeah. And let's just be clear too, not just kids, but middle-aged kids.
It's true.
Anybody. And when you're saying it, I know that I feel it deeply that I've had to learn. And I feel like this learning has helped me in my parenting so much, and really having to be curious and having to listen. And I think that's what I didn't do well at all. I was good at observing. I was good at making recommendations and let's try this and let's try that strategies, but they were strategies that were unattainable for you and were never going to work for you. And I love it to this day. So Meg, what about, and you'll go, no. And I go, okay, and so it's really about listening to you and seeing you and hopefully helping you to feel heard, because you are exactly perfect, exactly the way you are. And I've been trying really hard to remember that on this podcast, even that we need to do it in a way that works for both of us.
Yeah.
It can't just work for one of us. And I have to learn, sometimes you have to learn too, but I have to learn how my brain works. You have to learn how my brain works. I have to learn how your brain works. And coming from that place feels really doable when we're curious and we're asking questions about it, because then it doesn't become a judgment. It just becomes this, let's experiment and try this out and see what works. And then nobody has to fit into anybody else's cookie mold,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I even recognize that, like, I know it may not sound like it, Michelle, but there are times that I am limiting myself from saying things. I mean, I know for sure it does not feel that way, but
yeah,
I do catch myself at times like saying, okay, don't, just stop, Megan, just stop.
Yeah.
But it's also just feels so freeing to like have someone who's actually listening. And so I just want to keep talking because I'm like, no one's ever listened to me like this, please. I gotta get it all out before she stops listening, And it's like, oh, okay, we're on episode 20 now, 20, however many it is we're now. And it's like, okay, so she's going to continue to be here, but it's part of it's just kind of learning to accept the fact that it's changed and that a person can grow and be different. And so then having to just trust in that. Cause like for so long, I just never I didn't feel like I had it. And so now I have it. I'm like the fire hydrant. What is that analogy when it's like,
drinking out of a fire hydrant.
Yeah, drinking out of a fire hydrant. And so it's like, okay, it's there. We just have to trust in it and it'll come back.
And I think one of the strategies I've seen you use, if I can speak for you for a moment, my observation of what I've seen is you've asked for it more, what you need. And I think you've been more clear about what you've needed, and you've done a lot of work to get there. But I've seen you do it with your family. I've seen you do it with Brian. I've seen you do it with friends. And having to advocate for yourself so clearly as to what you need. And that's hard when you've been put down your whole life and told that who you are fundamentally, as you said it, isn't okay. It's no, I am okay. I'm exactly fine, exactly as I am. And I deserve to be heard. I deserve to be treated well, even if this or that doesn't happen the exact way that someone else thinks it should. I deserve to be here.
Yeah.
And to be present.
And just trusting you, trusting myself, and trusting the fact that if something does happen, I can repair it. If I do mess up, I'm really good at repairing.
Oh gosh, you're the best.
And I
And
think
you're the
like
best at taking, I just interrupted you, sorry, but you're the best at taking feedback. You really are.
Well, and I think for so long, like I've been so scared to speak up because I believed that if I spoke up and said what I really needed, then I would lose everybody. Because again, it would be showing who I really am, and that wasn't good. And but then it's this vicious cycle, because what I ended up doing was that I would try to pretend like that wasn't me, but it really was. And it was kind of, again, undeniable at times. So I've been trying it out. Like last night, right? I called you and it was a powerful day, but it was also a very exhausting day for me. And I just I was like, I need a glass of wine, maybe two. And we had talked about meeting today, and so I called you with like my little flush red cheeks, and I'm like, hi, guess what I did tonight? Just a heads up, I don't know if it's gonna change me tomorrow, but I wanted you to be aware.
It was cute. Yeah. And I appreciated it because it does help to know what's coming sometimes.
Yeah.
For sure.
Even like getting ready today, and we were going to meet around noon, and then I was like, oh, I'm just kind of looking at the time like, no, I need 12:30. And then I get to 12:30 and I'm like, I'm still, maybe I want to curl my hair a little bit. Okay, I'm going to curl my hair. And that's, I'm just trying to keep you in the loop at least, okay, yes, it's taking me a while, but I'm at least hopefully trying to keep you in the loop. I didn't keep you in the loop though about the fact that my computer died. So that was the one thing. I was like, I should have.
No problem. I think when we talk about this whole concept though of feeling like you're not meeting the needs or underachieving something, I think you just brought up something brilliant, which is keeping people in the loop, because the hiding piece of it, due to I'm guessing like the feeling of shame that you yet again didn't meet whatever expectations somebody is expecting of you, or maybe even you were expecting of yourself.
Yeah.
And one thing I think I've seen shift is that you aren't angry with yourself as often internally, it seems. Yeah. And so in accepting who you are and accepting that that's going to happen, and that you just have to, unfortunately or fortunately, give yourself 30 extra minutes to get to anywhere on time, or because you're going to forget the keys, and that you've given yourself that strategy of letting people know. So at least you're not coming into a wall of, what the heck, Megan, what's going on? And I think that's huge.
Well, I think that that's the piece where self-love has really shifted a lot of that, because I didn't love myself. I shut it down, and I locked little Rosie and Tallulah Jones. Those are my inner children. I locked them away. And
Rosie's the little one, and Tallulah Jones is middle school. Is that right?
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, sorry,
Rosie
didn't mean to interrupt, but
Rosie's my 3-year-old self who likes to show off her Care Bear underwear, and Tallulah Jones is like the middle schooler who's just like super angsty and like, I am just amazing. Those are the two. And I emotionally locked them away and suppressed them. And I had to go through a lot of repairing with them and apologizing to myself as an adult, saying, you did not deserve that. You are such lovely, amazing, incredible human beings. And it was easier for a while to like talk about it, like Rosie, you, and Tallulah, you. And it kind of separated me a little bit from them. And so it wasn't until I had to like realize that, wait, I am Rosie, I am Tallulah. That was a big shift for me. And actually saying to myself, I love myself, like that's something that, 4 years ago, I couldn't do. And I think that's where all the anger came from. I just didn't love myself. It's such an important thing to figure out how to honor yourself and honor the inner children and honor the uniqueness of yourself. But I had to say it over and over again. There were nights like where I couldn't sleep, and I'm like, I am smart enough. I am lovable. And I would actually start off by saying like, you're lovable, you're smart, you're talented. And then I realized, no, I need to be saying because you is still keeping me at an arm's length. I'm lovable. I'm smart. And I would just say it over and over and over again in my head. I had it said the opposite for so long that like it just was going to take a while.
To let it sink in.
Yeah, to let it overwrite that tape that I had in my head.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us today.
Well, thanks for being open also to talk about like what's happened in the past.
Yeah.
And I don't hold you responsible for that, you know, but like, I'm sure it must be really difficult to hear me talk about it. And I appreciate you being vulnerable enough to say, I played a part in this, and I'm not going to like carry it around like a badge of a warrior badge or whatever. But like, you're just to say like, yeah, I see that, and I'm glad that things have changed.
Yeah. And I think knowing better, doing better when you can, not that you're not going to make similar mistakes again, because you are who you are to some degree, but yeah, to be open to that shift. And I'm curious if there's other people listening that might also have experiences like this, because this idea that you're not living up to, you're not getting your quote unquote act together, it means so many things in different parts of our life. And so if you're thinking, oh, it's just your kid dealing with this at school, that isn't true, right? Because every part of your life requires executive functioning. We keep talking about making an ADHD friendly podcast and having intermission and things like that, and breaks, you know, such an important part of it. And I just curious if other people have had these experiences similar, and what they might have found. And that idea of self-love, I mean, I think we can all take that on, whatever your challenges are, whatever your limitations are. We all have them.
Yeah. And I would challenge also those who love people with ADHD, or who love a person where you recognize someone in your life who can never quite get their act together. Right? Because I'm sure that there's people who are listening who can like pinpoint that person right now in their mind. Mm-hmm. I would challenge you to reach out to them and maybe just ask, hey, how does this feel for you when I do this? Or just start that hard conversation. And it's amazing like what can come from it. Even just reaching out to them and saying, hey, how you doing? Like, really, how are you doing? And listen. And be curious about them, because you were saying like keeping me from a really dark place and just keeping me moving. The thing that I think I needed more than anything was just for someone to listen.
Yeah.
And to really listen and repeat back to me what they were hearing me say, and to not force me in any one way, just to listen.
I agree. And I think that's the hardest part when you see somebody you love. And I think a lot of people who have ADHD can get to pretty dark places, understandably. If everything you're trying to do doesn't feel like you can quite get it done, or others are perceiving that about you and even telling you that, I can understand that. But that's a tough one to sit with, that depth of that emotion, when maybe you yourself don't have capacity for that. So I think it's also really important, if you are loving somebody who's got ADHD and you're struggling with that, is to get help, because the whole family, the whole unit, anybody connected, sometimes it's helpful to have people who are trained that can help you walk through that with them, so that you learn some skills, they learn some skills, and you have a common language together.
It is a very important thing to have common vocabulary.
Absolutely. I love you so much. Thanks for talking and being vulnerable today.
I love you too. Thanks for listening.
Love you.
Love you.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Sisters. This series has us focusing more specifically on ADHD and all of its symptoms, and we're doing a deep dive into a list that we got from the book Driven to Distraction. If you enjoyed this episode as much as we enjoy laughing with each other, please share it with someone you think would benefit from the conversation. Make sure to follow us on whatever platform you're currently listening to so that you can get notified each week. Because next week, we're going to be talking about chronic procrastination and the fear that you won't do it right. Now, I have so many thoughts that I'm afraid to say because they may not come out well. So I'm going to wait for Michelle to keep me on track. But until then, here's to a great end of the week. And remember, stay curious. Be the Zen Buddha, Michelle. Be the Zen Buddha.
You be the crazy. Bring it on, Megan. Oh, I love it. Okay, you ready?
I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready.